Now, welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that asked you, what is your favorite type of Star Wars, or favorite way to sort of consume or experience it? And after that, as usual, I will then be reading and responding to some of the comments that have been left on the poll. And so, wasting no time, let's get right to those results, where we'll see that 52% of people who responded said that the movies were their favorite way to experience Star Wars. 29% then said it was the animated shows, followed by 12% saying video games or computer games. That then left 5% to say the books or comics or some other way was their favorite type of Star Wars. And that left a final 2% to say it was the live-action shows that they enjoyed the most, or the Disney Plus shows. Alright, now certainly the movies getting over 50% of the vote isn't all that surprising. I wouldn't have been shocked if that number would have turned out to be even higher, considering, there are a good number of people out there who really only watch or care about or kind of get into the movies. That's just what Star Wars is to them, which is fine. I totally get it. However, what just might be the most kind of surprising result here isn't that clearly the animated shows have a lot of fans, which I think we all knew, or that they beat out the live-action shows, but by how wide of a margin they did that by, that people seem to prefer the animated shows over the live-action ones quite a bit, that it was a very decisive victory, shall we say. Not to mention the live-action shows even lost, got more than doubled up by reading Star Wars books or comics. Not that I don't love to do that myself, mind you, or that I'm not pleasantly surprised, but you'd really think watching some form of Star Wars would have beaten out reading some form of Star Wars. And so what I think this says about the live-action shows, and this is just my guess here, feel free to tell me what you think in the comments below, but what I think it says or means is that a lot of people just find the live-action shows to be kinda generic, I think is the right word for it. They're kind of like watching watered-down or Walmart versions of the movies. You can just tell or even feel that the same amount of money is not being put into them, and hence they don't reach the same production values or have that same sort of feeling that the movies do. Basically, watching a Star Wars show just can't compete with watching a Star Wars movie. There's a whole other feel to it, and I'm not just talking watching the movie on the big screen. I'm talking about in general, or no matter where you may end up watching it. It feels bigger, and hence it makes the galaxy feel bigger and more real or alive in a way. Whereas the live-action shows feel like, well, they remind me of that meme. They feel like we have Star Wars at home, right? And don't get me wrong, I understand why they can't pour as much money into the shows as they do the movies, and that's not to say some of the live-action shows haven't been good or great or spent a little bit of extra money to do things right or to make them look better. Take Andor, for example, and you will see what a nice size budget and not relying on the volume, and instead going on location, can do for a Star Wars show. It can make it look much better, if still not quite movie quality. Also, let's be real, a big factor here is that, all other things aside, a lot of the live-action shows just haven't been really all that great. They've been generic in more ways than one, and if they were all fantastic, maybe it wouldn't matter quite so much that the quality or the visuals in general weren't up to the standards of the movies. The animated shows, however, why they seem to receive so much love and kind of stack up relatively well against the movies, though sure there are still a lot more people who like the movies than the animated shows, which is to be expected. But for one, I think it's because the animated shows have become sort of their own thing. I talked about that in a video a little while back, that they have set their own precedents in a way. We have certain expectations for them, which maybe are, to a degree, lesser than the movies or live-action shows. Not to mention, whereas the live-action shows get kind of compared directly to the movies because, well, they look the same in a manner of speaking, and then they come up lacking in comparison, the animated shows don't really get so much direct comparison, I think. You don't necessarily expect the same sort of experience from the animated shows as you do the films. And the experience you do get, I would certainly argue, is excellent for what it is. They look great. It is some excellent animation that Star Wars gives us. And they do end up feeling pretty big. They do end up feeling pretty grand, or like this is the real Star Wars galaxy, just animated. But anyway, now let's move on to some comments. But not before once again just saying thank you to everyone who votes and or comments on the polls or watches these or any of my videos. It is all greatly appreciated. Also a huge and very special thank you to everyone who supports this channel and the other one over on Patreon. And especially to those of you who upped your support recently after my other channel was demonetized. I cannot even begin to tell you or express to you how much that meant to me and to my wife, who, as many of you know, she basically runs the second channel, and she took all of this rather hard. Anyway, if you do want to support me there should be a link on your screen now, and you get access to my Discord server, and you can literally talk some Star Wars with me every Thursday night. We do a voice call or a chat that tends to go into the wee hours of the morning, and where I have made some really great friends who, again, I appreciate a lot. I appreciate everything everybody does on that Discord server, and those who support me on Patreon. Thank you so much. Alright, and now let's get to some comments here, and we will start, as we always do, with the top-rated comment from the poll, which this time comes to us from Nathan K., who said, KOTOR 2 Restored, Jedi Academy are peak your Star Wars story. And though I didn't talk at all about the games in my opening ramble there, I don't want to in any way undersell how beloved many of the games, like the KOTOR games, are, and that, yeah, they do allow you to put yourself into Star Wars and play it your way. And along with this, there were also a few people or a few comments that talked about how they love the tabletop role-playing games, which is a way I've personally never experienced Star Wars. I've been playing and DMing D&D for roughly 35 years, but never played a single Star Wars tabletop role-playing game, mainly because I think those who I play D&D with would feel kinda intimidated to play a Star Wars role-playing game with me, because they are not anywhere near as big or as knowledgeable of fans as I am, or like they would let me down because they don't know it well enough and wouldn't appreciate my story. That is at least what one of them told me recently when I kind of brought up the idea of trying a Star Wars game. But anyway, yes, I agree the games are an amazing way to experience Star Wars because it allows you to play Star Wars. And there have been many, many amazing titles over the years, and I think outside of the two Jedi series games, Disney has utterly and completely dropped the ball when it comes to this aspect of Star Wars. I don't think they realize just how many people love to play Star Wars games or video games or the tabletop games, and how great of a time it can be. Again, this is another area where Disney has truly failed. Alright, and now let's move on to this comment from Darth Scion, who said, I've been reading the novels since 2005 when I saw Revenge of the Sith in theaters. They kept Star Wars alive for so long, and they never get the credit for that. Novels are my favorite way to consume them because of being so used to it. And I know I've told this story before, but in the very early 90s when I was just moving into my teen years, I was, or at least I thought I was, growing up and getting older and moving on from childish things like Star Wars. Not to mention Star Wars had all but faded from the spotlight in terms of popularity. It was closing in on a decade since Return of the Jedi had come out, and there was no real word on when or even if we'd get another Star Wars movie. There were whispers of a prequels or something, but no real concrete answer on when that would ever happen. Anyway, if it wasn't for Heir to the Empire, if it wasn't for the EU, all the books and comics that came out, especially in the 90s, I really don't know that I'd be here today doing this. Star Wars is something, yes, I've always loved and always will love, but at that time in my life it was kind of taking a backseat to other things, go figure. There was nothing new, it was just watching the same 3 movies over and over again, and though I still watch those same 3 movies over and over again, I think you get my point. If that's all Star Wars had ever been, it would be something I would still enjoy today, but it wouldn't be something I could certainly devote a good portion of my life to. And so those books coming out, that completely changed the trajectory of my life. It kept me vested in Star Wars in a way that never would have happened otherwise. It opened up the galaxy and allowed us to explore it in a depth that the movies simply can't do. A book can always obviously go into more detail and can take you on different adventures than a movie can, longer adventures a lot of the time. And so yeah, without those books, without the EU, again, I don't think I'm here today. Maybe I am, maybe the prequels get me back in full force. But I think you get what I'm saying here. The books are a very important part of Star Wars for a lot of people. They keep it going in the dark times when there are no movies, there are no shows or games or whatever else it might be. Okay, and moving on now, we have a comment here from Scion O'Reilly Cork, who said, while the movies are definitely the top for me, watching this season of Bad Batch, I've grown a further appreciation for the animation, as it's not held back by a budget trying to look realistic like the live-action series. I find myself immersed a lot more in its stories than, say, Mando or Ahsoka. And I think you're really touching on one of the main reasons why animation sort of has a huge advantage over the live-action stuff, especially the shows and their limited budget, the Disney Plus shows. Not that animation isn't expensive to do in its own right, and also, of course, they have a budget when it comes to that too. But anyway, with animation, whatever you can imagine, whatever the story or the episode in particular calls for, not only can you just, well, animate it, But in theory, it's not going to cost you a lot more money to do something that in live action would be extremely tricky or difficult to pull off or to make it look good or realistic. Because to put it in way, way simpler terms than it deserves, you're just drawing it. I don't know, I just think it's so much easier for things to look good and fluid and natural in animation. Things that would look goofy in live action can work and even look amazing when it's animated. Or don't stick out the same way at the very least. One of the best examples I can think of was in the Ahsoka series when Ahsoka is standing outside on the ship and she kind of cartwheels and slices one of the other ships as it passes by. And in live action that looked kind of awkward, to say it politely. While if that had been done in animation, it probably would have looked pretty amazing, or at the very least, not as cheesy. Okay, and next up here we have a comment from Tony Opfer who said, "While when done well, I love all the options, but I must say there is just something about seeing a Star Wars movie on the big screen that is just such a unique experience that other mediums can't compare to." And I mean, I agree with that. As much as I love a Star Wars animated show as great as that has become, and as much as I can enjoy a live action show on Disney Plus when they're good, or as great as it is to play a Star Wars game, or as immersive as it can be to sit down and read a wonderful book set in this galaxy far, far away, there is just something different, something special about sitting in a theater and watching a Star Wars movie on the big screen, especially the first time watching it. It is where Star Wars began. It's where it began for me as a child watching Return of the Jedi. And I think it's where it's meant to shine the brightest or be at its best. And I really, really hope they somehow get this next batch of Star Wars films that they have coming out right. Be that the Rey movie, the Mando and Grogu movie, Dawn of the Jedi, or whatever else might actually come out. I just want to sit in a theater and enjoy Star Wars again. That is one of the best parts about this. Just sitting in the dark on a large screen watching an amazing story. So really, no matter what it is, and I know there are doubts about some of these movies coming up, I really just want to be able to sit in a theater and love Star Wars again. Well, I think that's going to be all I have for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me in what way do you enjoy Star Wars the most? Or you can feel free to tell me what you thought of what I or anyone else had to say about how we enjoy Star Wars the most. But whatever the case may be, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And so until next time, thank you for watching.